Well, joining me now in the studio to discuss this is Jim Harra, the head of business tax at HM Revenue and Customs. Mr. Harra, I know you never talk about individual companies, so let me put the question to you this way. MPs say that one major internet company is guilty of aggressive tax avoidance, devious, calculating and unethical. Do you agree?
I think multinationals often do arrange their tax affairs in a way that seeks to reduce their tax.
Unethical?
They've got considerable opportunities to do that. I think they have to consider for themselves what their ethics are, and they have to be able to account for that. What we do is, obviously, we enforce the rules, but we also encourage large businesses to adopt a low-risk approach to planning their tax. But ultimately, that's a decision for them and something for them to justify.
So will you be mounting the full investigation that the MPs are calling for?
I'm afraid I can't tell you or your viewers, or indeed the MPs on the Public Accounts Committee, what investigations we may have carried out or we may be carrying out. What I can say is we do regard large businesses as inherently risky because of the opportunities they have, and we sit on top of them, we monitor them very closely, and we challenge them whenever necessary.
Well, should you be monitoring them and challenging them in court, for example? Should you be taking an internet company to court as a test case to check if they're paying enough tax?
We wouldn't hesitate to do that if that proves necessary. Our approach is that we settle disputes by agreement where that is possible, but only in accordance with the law. So if we believe the law says we're due tax and a multinational refuses to pay it, we do litigate.
Do you understand, though, public anger about these agreements, these deals? I mean, if you're an individual taxpayer, you don't get to haggle with the revenue. You just have to pay up.
Our approach to settling disputes by agreement applies to all taxpayers, and in fact the vast majority of the disputes we have, large or small, are agreed and don't have to go to the tribunal or to the courts, but we do that where necessary. In the last 3 years we've recovered an extra £23 billion from large businesses through our investigations.
The amount of tax uncollected is £32 billion, isn't it?
That's correct. Our estimate of the tax gap in the UK from all taxpayers, including large businesses, is £32 billion, and that's why, in addition to all the work that we're doing, we're recruiting more tax inspectors and trying to collect more and more of that tax.
But isn't part of the problem these deals that you're doing? I mean, are you getting what the taxman is owed, or are you having to compromise with big firms because they're simply too powerful?
Our aim in settling a dispute is to get the tax that we're owed, the tax that we believe we would get if we went to court. Our settlements with large businesses have recently been rigorously scrutinised, first of all by National Audit Office and more recently by the High Court, and they've been found to give good value for the Exchequer and to be reasonable and legal.
But be honest with me, do you really think that you've got the power to tackle these multinationals? I mean, let's look at one individual case, Goldman Sachs. A judge in that case said that it was not a glorious episode in the history of the revenue. A whistleblower said that you had to let them off £20 million in interest payments on tax. It was legal, that's fine, but you were held over a barrel, weren't you? Because if you hadn't done a deal with them, they were saying that they wouldn't sign up to a new tax code, and that would have embarrassed the Chancellor.
We certainly dispute that figure, but we do accept that we made a mistake in that case. There was a mistake of process that should not have been made, and we have strengthened our governance arrangements to make sure we don't make that kind of mistake again. But nevertheless, in that case and several other large settlements, the National Audit Office found that the outcome was a good outcome for the Exchequer.
But do you feel that you have the power that you need to tackle these multinationals? Where does the balance of power lie?
We certainly have the legislative powers to investigate them, and we have the resources we need to do that, but we can only collect the tax that is due under the rules. We can't necessarily collect the amount of tax that some people would like them to be liable for.
It's all a bit cosy, isn't it? I mean, your ex-boss, Dave Hartnett, next year, just 2 years after he left the revenue, he'll be able to advise Deloitte, the big accountancy firm's clients, about how to get round the Inland Revenue, HMRC. Are you comfortable with that?
I think we have a professional relationship with the big four firms. It's not cosy, it's not antagonistic either.
So you're entirely comfortable with that Dave Hartnett will be basically advising clients how to get round you, how to run rings around revenue?
All former civil servants are subject to tight rules for what it is they can do.
Next year, just 2 years after he's left, he'll be able to advise Deloitte clients just exactly what goes on in the revenue, all the tricks of the trade.
There aren't necessarily any secrets, actually, about how tax works. We aim to be transparent about how the rules work and encourage all taxpayers to understand those rules and comply with them. So there aren't really tricks of the trade that we keep up our sleeve. It is the case that tax professionals do move sometimes between the department and big four firms. Not very often, but occasionally, and we do find that that is useful for us to bring those skills in. But as I say, former civil servants are subject to a very tight code of conduct that is enforced.
Jim Harra, thank you very much for joining me.